Cool. Okay, so we're going to learn about, basically, we call it the number system. Okay, but what I'm going to teach you all about is key. So what we're talking about when we're talking about the songs in this key, why it's in that key, how we tell which key it's in, how we work it from one key to another key. So there's going to be a whole lot of stuff. I'm going to write heaps of stuff on the whiteboard. But it's going to make it look a lot more complicated than it actually is. So like we're going to write out all the major scales, but if you're like a guitarist, you have one pattern that plays all of those scales. So it's not as complicated as it looks up here, but obviously we're trying to cover it generally for everybody. So scenario on this thing, the other night, Tuesday, we were over in Hastings. So we did the worship song Covered. So we finished that, and then Rangiора's worship leading, and she goes, "Oh, I want to go off the back of that into How Great Is Our God." Okay, so different key, different time signature, completely different song, but you don't want to, you're trying to make that transition as smooth as possible. So the simplest thing is not to change key. We can change time signature easy, because we finish on the E flat, so all we did is held a pad on the keyboard, and then the guitar restarts in the proper time signature for the next song. Okay, but the key is changing the song. So this is how the discussion literally went on stage. Myself, Rangiora, Shane. So Shane's a vocalist. For vocalists, if you're thinking if this is really for me. So Shane starts singing through it, and he's going, oh yeah, so it starts on the 1. Oh yeah, so the next one's a minor. Oh yeah, that's the 6. So he's working out the numbers vocally of where the chords actually lie. Okay. In the meantime, Rangiora is on Googling chords for How Great Is Our God, and so she comes up with How Great Is Our God in the key of C. So it went like this: C, A minor, F, G, C. Cool. Who can tell me straight away what key that is? I just said it before, didn't I? C. Cool. Who knows why it's the key of C? By looking at those. It's not because it starts and ends in C. You can start and end anywhere in the key. Eli? Because the minor? Yep. That's a clue. But that A minor could also be in the key of G. It could also be in the key of F. Okay, so the clue is the major chords. So I could tell you real quick, in any key, 1, 4, and 5 are major. Everything else is minor, unless it's a 7, which is diminished. And that's a real quick answer to throw at you, but who actually knows what I'm talking about? Yeah, a couple of you that are a bit more experienced. Yep, cool. So that's kind of like the real key thing to remember. So here we've got, if it was in the key of F, then the G would be the 2, which would make it a minor. If it was in the key of G, then it wouldn't have an F in it. Okay, so it's in the key of C, and we've got 1, that's a 6, which is a minor, 4, 5, 1. So because I've got those numbers, now all I do is I translate that to E flat, and E flat is my 1, so that does those two. Okay, that becomes C minor, that becomes A flat, and that becomes B flat. Cool. So really quick, we worked out how to play the song in a new key. All right, nice and easy. So that's part of what we're going to teach you how to do tonight. Cool. So when we talk about a major scale, who knows what we're talking about? Major scale? Couple, roughly. Okay, so remember, music theory is entirely created by mathematicians. So music was kind of like around, and then these mathematicians went, we've got to have some way of like communicating that to other people and writing it down. There's got to be some sort of system that we can put in place for it. So one of the things we'll teach tonight, the circle of fifths, is invented by Pythagoras, okay, which we'll get to shortly. But a major scale, basically there's 12 notes in music, Okay, A through G, and then back to A again, and so on and so forth. In between you have sharps and flats, in between each one of those except for B and C and E and F. So those are the notes on the keyboard that have no black note in the middle. Okay, and if you come down a semitone, it's flat. If you go up a semitone, it's sharp. So D sharp and E flat are the same note. Cool. So what you have is you have this pattern: tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That's what makes up a major scale. Okay, so that's the spacing in between. Does everybody know what those spacings refer to? So on any instrument, if you went from one note to the next note up, that's a semitone. Twice as much as that, so going up 2 semitones makes a full tone. Cool, just so we know what those spacings are. And then we're going to number the notes 1 to A. Cool, so we start with the key of C. You'll notice a lot of stuff in music starts at C rather than A, which makes sense for the alphabet, but the reason for that is C is known as the easy key, because if we put these out there from C, what we end up with is this. No sharps or flats, okay? Just C to C. So first scale to learn on the keyboard is C to C, because it's just every note, white note from C to C. Cool, so that's why it's called the easy key, no sharps or flats. So if you see a score of music with no sharps or flats in it, then you straight away know that you're in the key of C. Okay, so what we do from there is we find our fifth, and that's going to be our next one. So G, so a tone from G is A, tone from that is B, semitone from that is C, no sharp or flat in between, D, E, and then here, because there's between E and F there's no sharp, so from E up a tone is F sharp, and then back to G. Cool, so now we've added 1 sharp. Alright, so we do the same thing again from D, D, E, up a tone, remember was F sharp, and then what are we, semitone, G, A, B, a tone from B, no sharp or flat, so we go to C sharp, and then back to D, and then again we find our fifth, A, B, C sharp. Can anyone see a pattern forming here? Okay, so every time I add in a new sharp, it's coming into the 7th position, and each time I go through, the one from the 7th is coming to the 3rd of the next one. Okay, and that's going to continue through. So semitone from C sharp is D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. Cool, so 2 sharps, 3 sharps, and then our 5th is E, F sharp, sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E. Cool, and then our 5th from there is B. I know this bit's a little bit long-winded, but we'll get through it. It's just so we have these references written here for us to look at. C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, 5 sharps, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then C sharp, D sharp, okay, E sharp, sorry, no, yeah, E sharp, that's right, yep, and F sharp. Okay, so here we see E sharp. Who's ever heard of E sharp in music? Because I just said before there's no sharps or flats between E and F. Okay, so this is why sometimes you'll see notes that you don't recognise, because you'll see in a piece of music E sharp and you'll go, well, why didn't they just write F? Because that's what the note actually is F. Okay, so the reason for that is so that the key signature can be recognised, okay, because it has 6 sharps. Because if I made that F, then it would have 5 sharps, and you'd be confusing key signatures. Okay, so we're going to get the same thing here with C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp. I don't really need to even look at this one. A sharp, okay, and then we go B sharp, which B sharp is actually C, and C sharp. Reason being that we've got 7 sharps. Okay, so some of these ones cross over also with flats. So F sharp would also be G flat, which would have 6 flats. Okay, C sharp or D flat would have 5 flats. Okay, B or C flat would have 7 flats. Cool. Sounds like a whole lot of jargon at this point. Okay, as we carry on, because what we're doing is we're drawing this circle, so we're going C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp. Okay, so this is what's called the circle of fifths, because each time we move, we're going to the fifth of the previous key, and each time we do that, we're adding in a sharp. Okay, so there's a little saying that goes along with the sharps that we add in. So this is the first one we add in. So it goes fat cats go down alleys eating birds. Okay, fat cats go down alleys eating birds. Okay, so that's just like, you know, in music you remember like every good boy does fine lines. Okay, it's just a way to remember the order that those sharps are added in. Not something you use all the time, but you can also use that to write this out real quick, because if you chuck your F in before the C, then it's the same. Fat cats go down alleys eating birds. Cool. Okay, I'll just grab my book, make sure I'm in the right place. Nothing else in between that. Cool. And then as we carry on round, we go into flat keys. Okay, so then we go from there, G sharp, which is also A flat. So that's going to come up there. A flat, and now we're going to start counting down. So we're going 7, 6, 5. So normally what I do working out sharps is actually go backwards using fourths. because a fifth interval and a fourth interval are directly opposite of each other. Cool. So if you wanted to work out flats, normally you'd start here and come down that way, just using the 4 instead of the 5. Cool. Are we getting how these numbers are relating to notes now in keys? Cool. Almost. Okay, so we'll make it into more of a key shortly. But basically, if I said we're in the key of G, those are the notes that are available in the key of G. Those ones out of that scale. Cool? So when I teach guitar and that sort of thing, this is one of the first things I teach because it's really foundational to everything we do in music. Cool. So I'll just copy these ones down so it's quicker. E flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat, and that is 4 flats. And then our fifth is E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat, 3 flats, E flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, 2 flats, F will be 1 flat, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F, and then you go right back round to C. So if we put those in there, A flat, E flat, B flat, and then back to F, and then you come right round to C and go round and round and round. Cool. So that is a basic rundown on the circle of fifths. Okay. So key signatures in written music, they will also appear in the key signature in that order. So if you have written music, so F will always be first. So if we had 7 sharps, they would be listed actually in that order. Okay, that's just a bit of a side note. Just if you're at school and you're working with written music and that sort of thing, need to get them in the right order. Okay, cool. So for the flats, as we add them in, is also a saying for that. So these ones are actually coming into the 4th. Yep, cool. Yeah, so that's going to get confusing just because that's an F sharp instead of a G flat. But the one for that, I'll put down here. Battle ends and down goes Charles' father. Cool. Again, something that we're what we do, we're not going to use a whole lot, but it's just something to remember for the order of those. Cool. So I'll just make some space over here. So we have all of those keys now written out as a reference. Okay, so if you're a guitarist or a keyboard player or a bass player, by knowing your scales, you know how to find what all those notes are, okay, using your instrument. So when I think through stuff, I tend to just picture a guitar neck. in my head where the notes are, which as we go on, I'll show some patterns and stuff as well to that. Cool. So these are basic scales, and then we have what's called harmonized scales. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these here and I'm going to fit chords to each one of them. Okay. So we'll use the key of C. Oh, just see my note there. Before we move on to that, every one of these keys has a relative minor key as well. Okay. So who's heard the term relative minor? Yeah, same guys. Cool. So the way we find relative minor is we can find it here. So the relative minor of C is A minor, so it's in the 6. Cool. The other way is just to move down 3 semitones. Okay, so if we come from C, we've got semitone and a full tone, so that makes 3 semitones. That's the way I generally do it on the guitar. If someone goes, what's the relative minor? I just go back a couple of frets. Cool. So what happens there is if you do the minor scale of A, it's all of these same notes. They're just in a different order, so they start from A. Okay? But the difference between a major and minor scale is you have a flat 3, a flat 6, and a flat 7. Okay? So that's going to be important for this next bit, where we make these into chords. So the way, if you have a song that's got all those notes, if it's in a minor key, it's generally going to kind of revolve a lot around the A minor chord, and it's going to, that's what its home feeling is going to be. So whenever you come back to the 1 in a song, it sort of feels like it's coming home and resolving, and it's going to do that more around the A minor if it's structured around that key more. Cool. So chords generally are made up of 1, 3, and 5 of the major scale, or the minor scale, depending if it's a minor chord. So if we take the key of C, okay, and we are going to allocate chords to each one of these. So we're going to take C, 1 is C, 3 is E, and 5 is G. Cool, so that's nice and easy. So now if we do that with the 2, so I'll do scale numbers down here. So 8 is going to be the same. 1 and 8 are the same note, hence the term octave. If you move up an octave, you're moving up into the next register, and the 1 is starting there. Cool, so if we do that with 2, so we've got D, so we come down to the D major scale, okay, and we go D, 3 is F sharp, okay, so now we've got a problem because there's no F sharp in our C major scale, alright, so we need to flatten that back to F, so it's in our scale, F, 5 is A, and that becomes a minor chord because we flatten that 3. Remember the difference between the scales, a minor scale has a flat 3, a flat 6 and a flat 7. Because in triad chords we don't play a 6 or a 7, we just play 1, 3 and 5. A flat 3 makes it a minor chord. Cool? So we've got a minor there. If we come to the 3, come to E, our 3 again is a sharp, which we don't have in the key of C, so we need to flatten it to G, B, so that's another minor chord. 4 is F, there's my F all the way down here, so we've got F, A, and C, so that's a major chord. Alright, major by those. 5, G, B, and D. So that's major, 6 is our A. C sharp we don't have in that scale, so we make that a C. That becomes a minor. Okay, so 7 gets interesting. So we'll look at that. So B, find our B. So 1's all good. We get to the 3. We need to flatten that back to a D because it's got a sharp. We get to the 5, that's got a sharp as well. So now we have 2 flattened notes. So we have now a flat 3 and a flat 5, and that's why that becomes a diminished chord. Okay, so it's not a chord you'll see a whole lot because it's kind of funny sounding. But what you will see, okay, well, first of all, the reason it's diminished is because it's 2 minor third intervals on top of each other. That's the way we describe it. And then you can put another minor third on top of that and make it full diminished. That's kind of like, yeah, half of that. But what you will see a lot of is a 5/7. So in this case, that would be a G over B. The reason you see that a lot is because it works well running up or down to and from the 1. Okay. So yeah, that's the most common way you see a 7. I'll just check my notes, see if there's anything else to tell you. Do that. Cool, I think we're up to practical. Okay, so what we'll do at a later date is we'll talk about transitions as well between songs. But what we need to do is combine the knowledge of keys with the knowledge of chords. So this is a basic triad chord, but then we have all our 7s and 9s and 13s and all of that stuff to go through. So when we combine the knowledge of those two, it makes it easier to work out ways we can work transitions. So basically what we're talking about with this number system now is these here. So if we want to talk about a progression in a song, and I say it's a 6-4-5-1, then I know what key we're in. I know we're in C, so I know I'm going to play an A minor, F major, G major, C major. Cool? So remember I said 1, 4 and 5 are major. Everything else is minor except for 7, which is diminished. Okay, so that's literally the easiest way to remember it. 1, 4 and 5 are major, everything else is minor except for 7. Okay. Like I say, you hardly ever see a 7, so you don't have to worry about it so much. So all we need to do now is translate that to our instrument. So for keyboards, that means you need to know scales. Right? So you need to be practicing through all these scales and practice through them this way as well. So do C major and then from the 5th, G major, because then you're just adding in 1 sharp. Okay, and then D and so on. So you're adding in the sharps as you go. Cool. And once you get to know scales, then you get them in your head. With guitar, you have the extra benefit of there's some patterns that it makes. So, for example, if my 1 is D, straight above it is my 5th, back there is my 4th, up here is my 6. Cool, if I had a 1 on this string, so say we were in G, straight underneath is a 4, 5 and 6. And then you've got 2s and 3s straight up from where you're playing. So you just learn the patterns that it makes for guitars and bass players, which makes life easier for us. Cool. Alright, so we'll do some practical.